dear developers, and welcome to Nerdy Gorilla Tutorials channel. This is the first time to speak about web development, and also the first time to speak about front end. And I have chosen to speak about HTML, and especially HTML5, which is the current, and I believe it will be the future for web development as it's being developed from time to time. So without further ado, so you can stick around and enjoy your trip. So first of all, this is a snippet of an HTML document. This is a very simple and basic structure here. Okay, so now we are gonna have a look and have an intro to HTML. And as you see here, in this era of the internet and globalization of what complicated communications, it seems impossible if someone has not heard the term web browser. As a user or a web developer or any other frequent user, knowing the functioning of the internet is a must. So therefore, in this tutorial, we'll talk about the term HTML web pages in detail. So let's get started. So what we're going to cover here in this tutorial: first, what is HTML exactly? And we are going to have a brief history of HTML. Next, we are going to have a look on elements or components of an HTML document called HTML tags. Next, we are going to talk about semantic and non-semantic tags and what they mean exactly. And in the end of this tutorial, we'll have a live example of an HTML document, so you can go and have a walk around. So first, what is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And here we are going to specify hypertext as a word here. We're going to talk about specially and specifically also, because it means it's a markup language. HTML is a markup language which is transferred through Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So that's why it's called Hypertext Markup Language. Okay, and it's the standard markup language for documents designed to be displayed in a web browser. And also it can be assisted by technologies such as cascading style sheets, shortly CSS, and scripting languages such as JavaScript. Now, web browsers actually receive HTML documents from a web server or from local storage and render these documents into multimedia web pages. HTML describes the structure of a web page semantically and originally including cues for the appearance of this document. HTML elements are the building blocks of HTML pages, with HTML constructs, images, and other objects such as interactive forms may be embedded also into the rendered page. HTML provides a means to create structured documents by denoting structural semantics for text such as headings, paragraphs, lists, links, quotes, and other items. HTML elements are delineated by tags written using angle brackets. These tags, such as this here image, okay, they are included in these brackets here, okay, and also like this one, which is for input. These directly introduce content into the page. Other tags such as P, which stands for paragraph, surround and provide information about document text and may include other tags also as sub-elements. So now we can nest HTML elements inside each other. So we can, by doing that, we can form a structure. Okay. Browsers don't display these HTML tags, but in reality they use them to interpret the content of the page. HTML can embed programs written in a scripting language such as JavaScript, which affects the behavior and content of web pages. Inclusion of CSS, which is a cascading style sheet, defines the look and layout of content. The World Wide Web Consortium, W3C shortly, former maintainer of the HTML and current maintainer of the CSS standards, has encouraged the use of CSS over explicit presentational HTML since 1997. A form of HTML known as HTML5 is used to display video and audio primarily using the canvas element in collaboration with JavaScript. This definition was quoted from Wikipedia. Now, continuing in HTML. Again, HTML is a markup language that web browsers use to interpret and compose text, images, and other material into visual or audible web pages. Default characteristics for every item of HTML markup are defined in the browser, and these characteristics can be altered or enhanced by the web page designer's additional use of CSS. HTML, which we talked about earlier, stands for Hypertext Markup Language, as we said before. It was invented and defined by a physicist called Berners-Lee in the early 1990s, and it went into a development stage to go into stability for the HTML we see and use right now in current days. All right. So now let's have a look about and talk about inline level HTML elements. An inline element doesn't start on a new line by its own. Okay. It should be included in a paragraph or in a block level element, which we'll talk about later. Okay, but it doesn't start a new line by its own. Also, an inline element only takes up as much space as necessary to be displayed. Examples of inline HTML elements, like anchor tags. ABBR stands for abbreviation. Acronym. B for bold. BDO for bidirectional. Big for big fonts. BR for breaks, line breaks, button, citing code, etc. Okay, so you should know, and you should know them by heart, these inline level elements. Now we'll talk about block level elements. A block level element also starts on a new line, and the browser automatically adds some space like a margin before and after the element. A block level element always takes up the full width or full space available. It stretches out to the left and right as far as it can to fill the spacing. Examples are heading tags like H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6 tags. Address, article, aside, block code, canvas, DD, div, DL, etc. Also, you should know all these block level elements. Next, we'll talk about semantic and non-semantic elements. A semantic element clearly describes its meaning to both the browser and the developer. That's to say, elements that do have a meaning, that form a structure. Okay? Examples of non-semantic elements like div and span. They tell the browser nothing about its content. Also examples of semantic elements like for, table, article. All of these clearly define their content. And this is to show the semantic view of or the structure of elements. For example, here we have the header for the document. It looked like exactly like a printed paper, where you have a header, you have a footer, but the difference here, you have a navigation, for example, because it's an electronic document, not a printed document. Okay. Also, we have something called aside, which stands sideways, like for example, left navigation, and maybe you have right navigation here also. Also, you have the main, which is the main content of the page. Okay, before divisioning. Now you can structure this main into smaller parts, or split them into smaller parts for organizing. Like maybe you have an article here also, here as well. So now we will have another example of a web document. So let's get started.